Here it is at last, the Helios Tarot forecast for the month, or Tarot Horoscope drawn specifically for your astrological zodiac sign. I'm B.R. Newman, in case you didn't know that already. Check out my website, iamhelios.com, through the link below, and consider everything that I have to offer there. Consider signing up to receive any number of the personal readings that I offer, or consider signing up to take a course. The choice is yours. There's a lot to explore there. Also consider checking out Annie Botticelli's Storyteller forecasts to see the astrological side of everything you're going to see here. It's fascinating, I promise. So, okay, I guess we'll just jump right into it. So here it is, Aries, your Helios spread for the month of October. This is a 5-card spread, which is kind of like a miniaturized Golden Dawn spread, which uses 15 cards. In this case, we have 5 to the same result. You have a central theme, 2 dimensional timeline options you can choose from, a past section, and a fate section. In your central theme, that which most adequately sums up the whole story arc of the tarot spread we have here before us, is the 5 of Swords. All 5s in tarot are associated with the sphere of 5 on the Tree of Life, Gebura, and as manifest through air in this case, for Swords. On the surface, this is the experience of being cheated out of something, but the deeper meaning behind it is, of course, the lesson that is attained through the experience of having been cheated, so you can know where to place your loyalties, where to place your allegiance, who to trust, who not to trust, and so on. So the value here is on the learning experience, not on the defeat itself. Of course, this is not meant to be incentive to summon any kind of sense of victim identity by any stretch. This is telling you right now that all of the ways in which you have been defeated are specifically lining up circuitry within you to optimize your capacity to learn from your mistakes and find the light in the dark, find the light at the end of the tunnel. You could say look on the bright side of things, but not as a mechanism of repression or denial, but rather to choose to recognize the value of the shadow, the value of the difficulties and the sadness. For example, if you're painting a beautiful picture on a canvas, sometimes it's wise to start with black. Start with as dark as you can get, and then add the highlights to allow the colors and the shape and the form to pop, to make sense. As Bob Ross would so gently say in his own way, you need a little sadness in life to let you know how good things really are. So very simply, this central theme serves as a reminder. Avoid, or rather transcend at all costs, whatever tendencies you might have to derive a sense of self from victimhood. An act of such transcendence is in fact the prerequisite, the essential ingredient required to allow you to take advantage of the 2 opportunities you have here before you, represented by these 2 cards. On the one hand, you have the Knight of Swords, which corresponds to one of the Myers-Briggs personality profiles, if you didn't know that already. 16 court cards, 16 Myers-Briggs personality profiles. It makes a lot of sense. It's quite obvious once you look at it. So in this case, the Knight of Swords, the personality profile that most adequately embodies this dimensional timeline, or perhaps you could say that which is required of you, that personality profile or outlook or perspective that is required for you to take this alternative path, the alternative path to the sun, corresponds directly with the ESTJ, or the extroverted sensing thinking judger. So this is the part of you that's very hard charging, very dynamic, very forceful at times, but someone who takes the role of producer rather than actor, for example. Someone who loves order and structure, someone who loves to create that order and structure, and also somebody who's very sociable in the way that they're quite capable of organizing individuals to meet some specific end that is in line with that originating desire or inspiration to create order and structure. This is somebody quite traditional, like a results-driven administrator. There's not a whole lot of room for creativity or fun here. And it's quite serious, quite dreary, this path, it looks like. So, I mean, you can just kind of place that in your own mind. What kind of scenario would require that kind of perspective? And you can kind of look into your own life to figure out the specifics. And I think that upon your own chosen level of reflection, you can come to the conclusion regarding what exactly this timeline is speaking to, what choice you could make, as opposed to the alternative, the sun. Very different energy. On the plus side, quite clearly, this is a dimensional timeline upon which you get a lot done. You prioritize, you organize. So it's productive in that way, but not necessarily fun, and maybe you're at a point in your life where you can choose something different. Maybe you don't need to be entirely productive. We'll consider that. So let's look at the alternative dimensional timeline being the sun. As I said, it's a very different energy. In many ways, it's the appropriate opposite. The sun is about liberation, opening oneself up, or being opened up to a new way of living, free from the shackles of the drudgery and the monotonous, tedious, hyper-productive way of doing things, as illustrated quite beautifully and appropriately in the Knight of Swords. So the sun is a very free and light energy, whimsical, spontaneous, eccentric even, random, all for the sake of fun, freedom for the sake of itself. allowing oneself to experience true liberation, if not only as a means to demonstrate to others that such ways of living are possible. That could be a way of justifying it. For the hyperproductive personality profile, this could be the way of giving yourself a permission slip to do it, to live the freedom, live the liberation as a means to inspire others to do the same. So rather than perceiving this as merely goofing off or wasting time or wasting resources, whatever that might be, you could view this as an opportunity to inspire others towards personal emancipation. So it's actually pretty convenient that we have such a clear dichotomy laid out here. Sometimes these two-dimensional timelines can be quite similar, in which case we're not really clear what to do, but here you have the luxury of two very different paths to choose from. So at the very least, this makes it quite easy for you to find the ways in which your life is reflecting this scenario that's mapped out here before us. So I will emphasize again, as I do in many of these readings, this is not meant to map out the specifics of your own life, but rather this is a general reading applying to everyone with your shared sun sign. So it's up to you to do the meditations and inner reflections about what this could mean for you. It's up to you entirely to reach the level of specificity you require to derive meaning, to derive insight and guidance from this. If you would like more specifics, of course, you can contact me for a personal reading at that point, depending on how deep you go. If you involve astrology, we can easily chart courses and map out strategies according to some pretty remarkably specific details. So obviously, I highly recommend it. In your past section, that which has inspired all of this rich opportunity is the Star card, another one of the major arcana. I didn't mention before that the Sun, of course, is one of the major arcana cards, one of 22, and the Star is another one of those. So the Star actually represents faith, hope, trust, spiritual insight, etc. So somehow hope, faith, trust, and spiritual insight led to defeat. But of course what may have happened is that the Star energy actually carried over a bit and allowed you to transcend the negative experience of defeat and allowing you to leap right over to the end result, to leap right over to the intention of the Five of Swords, which is of course to learn your lesson. So it may have actually been through faith and spiritually inspired action you were able to let some old dynamic that is no longer serving you, or old habit or old embodiment of addiction crumble away as it is supposed to. Whereas in other situations without the Star-inspired faith, that may have been quite painful. Instead, you were perhaps inspired to let something go quite easily. Perhaps the spiritual insight was strong enough to provide not only the incentive, but the means to see it through. So that's one possibility. Another very real possibility that we have to consider is that faith actually led you to make a mistake that you wouldn't have normally made if you were using your head. So perhaps faith was not the appropriate ingredient in this case. Of course, it's up to you to decide, since this is a quite general reading. So in that case, what the Five of Swords may in fact be saying is that it's time to much more carefully strategize, and it's time to plan according to the finer details that you perhaps had overlooked through the experience of the Star that led to the defeat. And now that you've learned your lesson, maybe the dimensional timeline that's for you is in fact the Knight of Swords, where you need to carefully and meticulously strategize. Maybe it's time for that. If in the alternative scenario the faith led you to transcend the difficulties of the defeat and simply learn your lesson, then now you have earned the opportunity to step into the light of the sun and to liberate yourself. If you're not there yet, you'll probably get there anyway. In your fate section, you have the Lovers, which is about integrating opposites together. It's about providing balance where there wasn't before, through the experience of love, through mutual sharing, affection, devotion, and so on. The Lovers is an alchemical card, meaning, of course, that it embodies the experience of making gold from lead, or taking basic elements, combining these impure elements together in ways that one had not previously imagined, and then through persistence, through perseverance, through trust and will and faith again, of course, the miracle is achieved. So we can see that the faith is a lesson that is persistent. So in which case I would suggest that it's far more likely that despite the fact that you may have in fact experienced the defeat as something negative, in which case you must much more carefully strategize in the future, there is still some need for faith. So you had faith that may have led you astray for a reason. If that is the case, it still was for a reason, because you did need to make the mistake in order to learn the lesson, so the faith did actually guide you in the right direction anyway. So I wouldn't undermine the validity of faith if it may have led you astray in this experience, if that is the case. So the Lovers is quite promising. This suggests, of course, that both of these quite opposite dimensional timelines are within your grasp, so by choosing one, you're not necessarily abandoning the other. A very good sign. The Lovers indicates a quite broad experience, a very broad spectrum. What you're capable of this month is perhaps a little more multidimensional than usual. Or at least if this is the case, you're likely to be much more aware of it. So utilize that opportunity. You have the privilege of having these two quite opposite dimensional timelines in front of you, and you have the capacity to choose one and stick to one, depending on where you've been. So, of course, this requires personal reflection. If you would like more help, more insight, you know how to find me. And that about wraps this up for the month. So thank you for listening to this and for watching. Please do consider contacting me for a personal reading. We can take this so far and go so much deeper than we have here. It's pretty remarkable, really. You can gain so much, as many people have already. IamHelios.com is the website. I'm B.R. Newman. Thanks again.